as you can see, things have changed a little bit. I have 2 monitors now, which is why my camera is at a much more flattering angle, I think. And why you're not just seeing a poorly framed bookshelf and a wall. So I think this is looking a lot better. Unfortunately, the result is I have to learn where to look now, because I'm used to looking here to look at you. Now I have to look up here. So that's going to be a curve, but that's fine. Let's switch to something a little less offensive to the ears. This was a nightmare to assemble, by the way. So I have an industrial, like, monitor arm on the back of my desk, but my desk has an overhang that's too long, so I had to actually put, so for the clamp to get around, so I had to actually get my brother to drill in an extension to the desk, and then that's clamped onto that, and now I have one monitor that's vertical, which is why this is so high, because the camera's now sitting on top of the vertical monitor, and I have one that's just a normal horizontal, and they're both bigger than my previous monitors, so what's great is I'm not going to be doing this stupid thing where I'm looking at my phone constantly. And in addition, I figured out some other things as well, so I can actually run certain games on OBS that I couldn't before with one monitor. In particular, I can get Cruelty Squad running. Deus Ex still doesn't like it for some reason, so I'm going to have to figure that one out. But there are now things we can do, which is pretty cool. I think I'm also going to move the Vosh soundbox out of OBS to something else, so I don't have to move the mouse out of Elden Ring to do that. I still remember when Sargon streamed for 4 hours on 9 minutes of content. Good times. Oh, we're going way back. So, basically the idea here is because the old Shoe on Head video was well received, we're going to go through a few things like that. And I've titled this one Vintage Carl Cassette 1 because there is a backlog here, and I don't know if we're going to go through everything. But we might. But we're gonna start from the oldest stuff he has and kind of work our way up and sort of see what's changed. I think that'll be kind of interesting. I hope you have focused on other things other than drama. I've been primarily focusing on things other than drama. It's just the drama is all people pay attention to. We had a research stream and I was on a panel about stochastic terrorism just yesterday. Back when Soygon was just an avatar, yes indeed. That is how far back we are going. Although on the subject of drama, I see that Polly is still streaming about me. Says, dear God. Life's too short. Ah, we're back at 3333 subs again. Beautiful. And thank you for subscribing, Sky Larnelson 1993. I just realized that those bars are new subscriptions. I didn't realize that before. I always thought it was just when a subscriber entered the chat, but no, that's apparently when a new person subscribes, so I need to thank you now. Like, I don't remember him being as incredibly homophobic back in the day. Really? Has he gotten more homophobic recently? I thought he was heavily transphobic. I don't remember him being homophobic. Why did you block me? Did I block you in Pursuit of Knowledge? I'm not sure I... Oh, you're that one. We'll talk later. I've got a call-in stream coming in soon, so you can come on for that. We need some contention. Cells, after all. Alright, well, if the storm knocks out our internet, my apologies. But, let's get into it. So we're looking at vintage. 2003 Sargon, I believe. Oh boy. No, 2013 Sargon. God, not 2003 Sargon. 2013 Sargon. Oh my god. Oh, this looks so bad. So this is, I'd completely forgotten about this person's. This is, I think, the oldest video that Sargon still has on YouTube. It might be his first. But this is Anita Sarkeesian doesn't understand people, in brackets, feminist frequency. Does anybody remember this? This is way back from Gamergate. That's how old this is. Whoever thought back then that this would become this old? Alright, get ready folks, this is gonna be rough. This is an almost 10-year-old Sargon video. Possibly his very first. Blissfully it is short, but just listen to this, okay? I tried playing it a couple seconds ago before the stream started. Which I guess wasn't a couple seconds ago, but before the stream started I tried running it for a couple seconds, just to hear it. Get ready for this. Ready? Alright, 3, 2, 1.
I just want to clear up a little confusion with the guys about the right reasons and the wrong reasons to hate on Twilight.
Okay. That's pretty good, right? That's not terrible audio for that time period. Because she has like a studio and everything, you know, she has equipment. Let's listen to this and let's let it continue.
I just want to clear up a little confusion with the guys about the right reasons and the wrong reasons to hate on Twilight.
People are allowed reasons that aren't your own, but go ahead, let's hear it.
It's like it's like it was recorded with a pen. Listen to this. Just listen to this. Oh god, he had an ugly avatar back then too. I forgot about that.
People are allowed reasons that aren't your own, but go ahead, let's hear it.
People are allowed reasons that aren't your own, but go ahead, let's hear it. Okay.
These are the wrong reasons.
Thought it was going to be about a bunch of badass vampires who wanted to kill people and drink their blood.
Those are the right reasons for men. They might not be the right reasons for women, but that's not the issue here.
And then also the endless array of "he's so gay" comments on YouTube.
Is actually amazing to me. In fact, I genuinely think it takes real skill to take something that is made by women, made exclusively for women and bought exclusively by women, and make it about the male's reaction to it. It's quite incredible.
The problem with the criticism of "he's so gay, what a gay..."
Who was that? That didn't sound like Sargon there. That sounded like somebody else. Listen to this again.
Made exclusively for women and bought exclusively by women.
Oh, fuck. I think I know who that is. Is that Nima?
And make it about the male's reaction to
That's
it.
the academic agent. Oh, I didn't know they went so far back. Oh, that's interesting. If that's him. I could be mishearing, but I'm certain that's him. Okay.
It's quite incredible.
The problem with the criticism of "he's so gay, what a gay lord," is that he's too sensitive for men. The author was a woman and was writing from a woman's perspective. When a man looks at it from a man's perspective, he sees a lot of...
Hey, just read the Iliad. Like, this guy's got like this big statue of Sargon, or this I don't know what you call it, relief or whatever of I'm assuming this is also Sargon of Akkad. like he's posturing as this classicist, right? Read the Iliad and just read about like Achilles, weeping, and I mean, you want to talk about he's so gay, like dear God. Twilight is positively stoic compared to a lot of ancient literature.
Emotions and attributes displayed that he would personally never publicly
Oh, hey, Merrick, how are you?
display. In his eyes and the eyes of other men, they aren't appropriate for a man, and so he calls them gay. You know, it's not mature, but that's his feeling and reaction to it. He doesn't think that it's appropriate manly behaviour, and there's a good reason, because the authors portrayed him becoming a mental stalker when he acts like that. And most men think, shit, I don't want to be a mental stalker.
So just to recap,
The point is here that Twilight wasn't written for guys. We are not Twilight's demographic. Girls are, and they buy it by the fucking ton. Not just young girls, not just, it's across the entire fucking spread. So if I was feminist frequency girly, I would genuinely be more worried about the fact that
This might not be academic agent. It's similar. The accent is similar, but and granted, like this is like a difference of quite a few years, so his voice probably would have changed over time. This is tricky. I don't know who this is exactly.
agenda, the ones that I'm trying to fight for the empowerment of, seem to naturally gravitate towards this guy who is a creepy, overprotective, manipulative stalker, and that would freak me out. Do you know what I mean? You can rag on guys all you want for not liking him, but guys aren't the ones that are supposed to like him. Girls are, and they fucking do.
the wrong reasons are that Edward is too sensitive, that he's gay, and that he's not violent enough.
There is no such thing as a wrong reason. A reason is a neutral scientific cause of an event.
A reason is a neutral scientific cause. What? Hang on. So she's saying that the wrong reason, i.e., like, I take her to mean a not respectable reason to dislike Twilight is because of all of these, like, of pointing to these specific qualities of Edward. Not saying that these are factually incorrect. They exist. They're reasons, right? But that was a weird response.
Enough.
There is no such thing as a wrong reason. A reason is a neutral scientific cause of an event. That's like saying there was a wrong reason that someone murdered his mother. The act is wrong. The reason is entirely neutral.
Well, you're stacking the decks there. It's wrong if it's murder. It's by definition wrong. But for example, if his mother was trying to like shoot him with a gun, and in self-defense, like he threw something at her to knock the gun away, and she tripped and fell and died, then that would be deeply unfortunate, but it would be one of the only right reasons to kill that person in that context. Because in that case, what you're looking for specifically is justification. A right reason means a justified, or a reason rather, that justifies the act. That's sort of what we're talking about here. I don't need to explain this to you because, unlike Carl, you're not brain dead. Maybe he's grown over the last 9 years. I rather doubt it.
The right reasons, however, are that Edward is a creepy, manipulative, controlling, overprotective...
Is there a credit for the other guy in the description? I didn't see one. Maybe in the comments? I see here, when did Sargon record this in the toilet? Yeah.
Stalker.
All your reasons are absolutely perfectly valid. Edward is a manipulative, total bastard. Those reasons are just as abhorrent, or should be, as far as I'm concerned, just as abhorrent to women as they are to men. Men don't like seeing other guys be creepy, manipulative, overbearing bastards to women, and I would not have thought women like to be treated like that. However, I must be wrong, considering the overwhelming point of view of the demographic at which it's aimed, is yes, that is exactly our fantasy. That is exactly what we want.
Ultimately, what you dudes are saying is that in addition to being emotionally abusive, you want Edward to be violent, sadistic, and physically abusive.
No, we don't want Edward to be abusive at all. We don't want him to be emotionally abusive. We don't want him to be physically abusive. Men derive pleasure from violence when it is used for acceptable roles.
Men derive pleasure from violence when it is used for acceptable roles. So that's why God of War is popular, right? Okay.
As in the defense of loved ones, the taking of objectives in war, legitimate sporting competitions. No one wants to see Edward just beating Bella because she's a pointless piece of wood.
So next time you're with your buddies
I mean, I wish that was true.
talking about how much you hate Twilight, you can just repeat after me. I hate Twilight because Edward is a creepy, manipulative, overprotective stalker.
How about you repeat after me? I don't know what men, or apparently women, think or why. And it's not my place to dictate to them anyway, so I'm going to stop making stupid assumptions because it makes me look like a fool.
Profound, Carl. So, what we learned today, children, is that a reason is a neutral scientific cause of an event. On that note, we follow with Anita Sarkeesian doesn't understand words, apparently. See, like, the resolution's low, but that would actually hold it today. That's a pretty good intro. It's actually similar to mine. That's very similar to mine. Like, even the way the music goes, like, dun 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 dun. It's good, actually.
Dictionary.com defines conversation as the informal interchange
Oh my
of
god,
thoughts,
Carl,
information,
it's worse.
etc. by
This is your second video. How's it worse? I can't even hear that.
Dictionary.com defines conversation as the informal interchange of thoughts, information, etc. by spoken words or communication between persons. We are not having a dialogue, Anita. You are talking to us. You mean a lecture. Three words, and 2 seconds in, and you've already misinterpreted the meaning of a word.
Wait a minute. Hang on. Was he responding to the title card? Feminist frequency. Conversations with pop culture. Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
Dictionary.com defines
He's attacking the title Conversations with Pop Culture. I mean... I don't know. Did she literally intend to propose that she was going to have a casual back and forth with the abstract concept of pop culture?
conversation as the informal interchange of thoughts, information, etc. by spoken words or communication between
Can you guys hear any of that?
We are not having a dialogue, Anita. You are talking to us. You mean a lecture. 3 words, and 2 seconds in, and you've already misinterpreted the meaning of a word. It's okay, I can forgive that. I'm sure the rest of it will completely redeem that mistake.
A trope is a common pattern in a story or a recognizable attribute in a character that conveys information to the audience. A trope becomes a cliché when it's overused. Sadly, some of these tropes often perpetuate offensive stereotypes.
Anita, have you forgotten what you're trying to do? You're trying to prove that women are being demonized and stereotyped in tropes. If you're trying to prove something, it means you're trying to use the scientific method.
What?
Otherwise, you just have a religion. If
We need to have, like... You know what I need to do? I need to make a compilation video that's just the wisdom of Sargon of Akkad. And it's just every little bit like this. Just A reason is a neutral scientific cause of an event. What the hell did he just say here?
Trying to prove something, it means you're trying to use the scientific method. Otherwise, you just have a religion.
If you're trying to prove something, it means you're using the scientific method, or you're trying to use the scientific method. Otherwise, you just have religion. You should get your sociology degrees refunded, guys.
If you say, I'm sad by this, or I find these offensive, then I cannot trust what you have to say after that. I automatically think that what you have to say is compromised by your inability to separate your emotions from the facts. If you can't separate your emotions from the facts, that means your information is going to be half complete. If your information is half complete, I cannot rely on it to use it to form my own opinion on, because I already know the information is compromised. Alright, it's probably just nerves. I'm sure it's not an endemic issue in this video.
Who remembers the
I feel so good about my production values now.
1994 issue of Green Lantern number 54, where Kyle Rayner finds that his girlfriend, Alex DeWitt, has been brutally murdered and stuffed into a fridge? Okay, well, I've never actually read Green Lantern.
Why would you feel entitled to comment on it? Why wouldn't you go out and read it as preparation for this video? What kind of research do you think I will assume you have done if you say I did no research? Alright, we will assume that the person who has told you what happened has read it. We will assume that they know what happened, they knew and understood the nuances of the comic and what the feel and the purpose of the plot was. The delicacy it was handled with, the emotional reaction from the man, which I'm sure was pretty intense. He's just found his fiancée chopped up in the fridge. Jesus fucking Christ, I would freak the fuck out.
But thankfully Gail Simone did, because she began to see a trend. Simone was sick of seeing superheroines who have either been depowered, raped, or cut up and stuck in the refrigerator.
The problem with this is that you can't get sick of something by seeing it once.
Well, no, but Gail Simone didn't get sick of it by seeing it once. This was an example of a recurring feature in which female characters are killed off to create dramatic stakes or dramatic escalation for the male characters because they're the main characters. That's what Simone is highlighting.
There was, as far as you have proved, one person stuck in the refrigerator, cut up. Okay,
but Carl, the quote, remember, Anita doesn't understand words. The language here is specifically superheroines who have been either depowered, raped, or cut up and stuck in the refrigerator. These are examples. This is not exhaustive. The point is, these are characters who have been in some way turned into casualties for the sake of motivating the male character, because they have essentially become plot devices.
I tell you what, I will not mark you down on that.
In 1999, she created a startlingly long list of over 90 comics.
Let's see here. Batwoman dead, Batgirl 1 paralyzed. I don't think the mother counts because that was both parents. Parents are like, they're sort of a different category by themselves. Elastigirl. Oh, apparently that's not just a Disney name.
That feature female superheroes who suffered a loss of superpowers, brutal violation, or an untimely gruesome death, most often as a plot point for the male hero to seek revenge or further his heroic journey. She called this reoccurring pattern women in refrigerators, for obvious reason.
Since all you've done there is shown that the depower trope, according to tvtropes.org, is applied quite evenly across the sexes, I'm not really sure how that supports your argument. unless perhaps comic book writers were specifically targeting women with much higher frequency than any other media. So let's...
Keeping in mind, so this guy is criticizing Anita for not reading a comic book in preparation for this, despite the fact that she's actually reading off from research that already looked at the comic book. Like, as if I need to have read every single piece of Greek literature to understand and make use of something that relies upon a survey of Greek literature to, make some kind of observation on culture or history or something. And he is stuttering through his responses in a video essay. He hasn't even bothered to write down what he's going to say. He may literally be on the toilet with a pen recorder.
Let's assume that.
Since it was originally created, the list has continued to grow. I'm just going to show you a few examples. Spider-Man's first love, Gwen Stacy, was thrown off a building by the Green Goblin back in 1973. Despite Spidey swooping in and heroically catching her before she hits the ground, she still died either from whiplash or from shock. Unsurprisingly, this seemingly random death of a significant character.
Dictionary.com defines random as proceeding made or occurring without definite aim, reason, or pattern. The Green Goblin captured Gwen Stacy to lure Spider-Man into a final confrontation and use her as an advantage in the fight.
Yes, but there are expectations and narrative tropes in which that character typically survives because it would be tonally dissonant with the rest of the series, which is why it's done for shock. That's why it is unusual, for instance, that Picard gets assimilated by the Borg and it's left on a cliffhanger and it seems like he's dead in the best of both worlds. So Carl, as of 9 years ago, did not understand the concept of narrative. That's interesting.
There was a definitive aim and purpose there. Ergo, her death was objectively not random.
I like how he's talking about this. Like the Green Goblin is a real person. Like if somebody said, and then the planes on 9/11 just came out of nowhere. What do you mean they came out of nowhere? They were hijacked by people with a political ideology, and they, like, that's the level we're operating at here. But what we're talking about is the decision of the writers to kill off a character in a comic that does not do that normally, so it's inconsistent. This is random for the narrative. It's not random in universe. Obviously, the characters have reasons. They didn't have Spider-Man randomly just shank Gwen Stacy in like a normal slice of life scene. That would be random.
Okay, we will just assume you're using random as a synonym.
As a synonym.
Or
Carl.
intentional.
Outraged fans of this.
He had to edit this, right? Like, he heard his audio. He heard this. He played this over and over again. And he chose what to put into the video. This is before YouTube, what are they called? Not the shorts, but the thing. Well, I guess they were just shorts. But like when you have the why do I not know any of this terminology? This is my job or something. He had to sit down and splice this. That's the recording he chose.
Series. The writers chose to kill off an important female character for the sole purpose of giving Peter Parker a more complex and interesting story arc.
Getting real tired of your shit, Anita. What possible story arc could be more important to Peter Parker than this? This is his first fucking love. His arch enemy has just thrown her off a fucking bridge, and instead of managing to save her life, he is the one that kills her.
These sound like the recordings of that guy who sent a letter bomb to Bjork.
The comic is about Spider-Man. He is the protagonist. Of course, the story is about him and what he has to lose in order to grow as a character, because character comes from adversity. It wasn't just because she was a woman. It was because she was important. Why don't you think women can be important, Anita? I'll put this one down to low self-esteem. We'll move on to the next point. Fuck.
In the Batman universe,
God. He cut this. He cut this. He processed it, and then he published it. He went over this. He would have gone over this. 26 minutes long. This would have been hours of work. Hours and hours and hours. Just, oh
Stephanie
God.
Brown, who's played many characters such as the Spoiler, a female Robin, and also Batgirl, was gruesomely tortured to death with a power drill by Batman's enemy, the Black Mask. The highly sexualized images of Brown being tortured spanned across multiple issues. Some fans were so outraged by this fridging of Batgirl that they referred
Which is fair, actually. So you look at this image here, right? Let me blow this up a little bit. So this is what Anita's talking about here. This is a pose meant to titillate the reader, while the character in question is being tortured and murdered. So they are sexualizing a character for the audience, because this isn't from the perspective of the murderer, this isn't from the perspective of Batgirl, and they're presumably, is this Batgirl or is this somebody else? The character. Because there are many different angles this could be from. You could simply not display this. Like, there are a whole set of different things you could choose to do. Remember, this is the artist's full discretion here. They can do whatever they want with this image. So what she's pointing out is there's something rather disturbing here about the fact that, oh, we have a female character being tortured to death. Let's turn it into softcore porn while we're at it. It's disturbing. It's disturbing that there would be an impulse to do that in the first place.
to this as torture porn.
So you don't watch much Game of Thrones then?
Another strong female superhero who met an untimely
President Sunday, you have to offer a counter-argument to every one of his points, if I can hear them. It's sort of impulsive. I don't even want to respond to every single one. I more just want to observe them. It's just... It's automatic now.
and trivial death was Big Barda. She was the leader of the Female Furies and also a
It's like I'm reliving the glory days.
member of Birds of Prey and the Justice League.
This is the Watchmen of YouTube politics.
She was married to Mr. Miracle, and interestingly, she was actually physically stronger than her superhero husband. Although Big Barda had all of these superpowers, she was killed in her kitchen with no sign of a real battle.
That's not what trivial means. But I'm sure that was a mistake, so we'll move on. This death wasn't inconsequential for her husband, was it? In fact, one might suggest that, as the main character, it was quite important. I'm just going to find my dictionary again.
Listen to the rage here. We're talking about comic books.
And of course, her death conveniently created a narrative for her husband. He struggled with whether or not to use the anti-life equation.
Let's be honest, P.S., you're going over all these old videos because they're the only ones with worse audio than yours. That's exactly right. It reminds me that there's hope.
Which would allow him to control the willpower of all sentient beings. Big Barda is just one of many female characters whose random and meaningless death was constructed in order to create a more intricate storyline for a male hero.
The thing is, it's not really very convenient for the main character. It forces them to change, and not always for the better, and part of the character's growth is overcoming the temptation to use super weapons or doomsday devices.
Personal opinion, I don't think they sexualizes women intentionally. It's that many comic artists have first learned how to draw women for porn art. Doesn't make it less bad. Well, that means they do sexualize women intentionally. Right? That's exactly what that means. But moreover, that's a selling point for the comics. Forgot just how bad Carl's actual arguments were. Dude is completely media illiterate. He's not just media illiterate, like, this is Like he just makes stuff up, and he will act like he has the authority of some ancient institution behind him. Reasons are a neutral scientific cause of an event. Like, where did he get that from?
Or superpowers or whatever, and the terrible consequences that would occur, and that's something that involves us in the story. It's not making light of her death. You seem to imply that these things just happen and people just say, right, so how's the weather?
Comic books can be a little bit difficult to follow since characters
Okay, I think we get the idea. I can't do any more of this. Let's, he changes format a little bit. And so for a little while, well, I'll show you. So for a little while, his videos look a little different. So you can sort of, here, let me recenter that a little bit. Oh, that's fine. You get the idea. So we have his first video down here. We have the Anita one cut off. And then for 4 videos, we have just the avatar in front. And he does this sort of repeatedly. You can see a couple of these here. These now become sort of his I don't know, his miscellaneous videos, where it's just sort of him talking to the audience. And I do that sometimes when I have, like, my avatar is my video. So when I'm making, like, an address to somebody, I'll put that up, with the exception of the Destiny one, obviously. But we have the High Priests of Marduk, the Presumption of Guilt, Better Than Slavery, and the Balance of Power. I'm not going to go through all of them. I just want to get a taste of what they're like, so we're going to do that. This is the High Priests of Marduk. See if his audio improves.
Approximately 2,500 years ago, in what is now Iraq.
I think that's better. It's more consistent. That's audible, at least.
The city of Babylon stood at the center of a vast empire that stretched from the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea, and ruled over numerous and diverse peoples. In the center of Babylon, the great ziggurat Esagila towered over the ancient capital as a permanent and immovable reminder to all who travelled from as far west as Italy and as far east as India that the great Lord Marduk reigned supreme in the heavens and kept a watchful eye on the world. At the top of the ziggurat was an altar, upon which sacred offerings of animals, grain, wine, and incense were sacrificed to Marduk by his priests. These priests derived great authority.
It did not get better. This is the Presumption of Guilt.
There is a disturbing trend in modern
Oh, that's beautiful by comparison.
society that is proceeding forward unchecked at a rapid pace because people do not seem to have the philosophical tools and arguments to prevent it. Anglosphere societies claim to be the progenitors of modern democracy and freedom, and historically England has had a much better track record than most nations. This is primarily based on a core value of English common law, presumption of innocence. This is possibly the most important principle in the application of justice, and why we consider English law to be superior to all other legal systems that do not operate under it. Wikipedia's definition is, quote, "The presumption of innocence is the principle that one may be considered innocent until proven guilty. The application of this principle is a legal right of the accused in a criminal trial, recognized in many nations. The burden of proof is thus on the prosecution, which has to collect and present enough compelling evidence."
This is going to be in the context of, if my timeline is correct, Me Too stuff. Let's see. I'm not seeing anything specific.
Convince the trier of the fact, who is restrained and ordered by law to consider only actual evidence and testimony that is legally admissible, and in most cases lawfully obtained, that the accused is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. If reasonable doubt remains, the accused is to be acquitted. Now, what does this mean? First and foremost, the purpose of the presumption of innocence.
What's our timeline? I'm terrible at this. Let me see. So the Me Too movement. You're right. This would be prior to that. So the first use of Me Too was in 2006 by sexual assault survivor and activist Tarana Burke. It was used on MySpace. But it picked up during the when the sexual abuse allegations against Harvey Weinstein popped up.
Is to protect innocent people. By any rational and scientific means possible, one must ensure that innocent people are not wrongfully punished, as this is unjust. This is the capital principle under which a free society can operate. If innocent people are routinely punished for
Okay, this is boring. We get the idea. What's better than slavery?
England is a nation of shopkeepers. Napoleon Bonaparte. Whilst this statement by the great Corsican general may initially seem to be derogatory, Napoleon actually meant it as an astute observation on the nature of Britain and as an explanation as to why the British Empire was so successful. To be the master of your own financial destiny, you must own a business. You must be the one to whom profits are paid. You must be the one who makes the decisions on your day-to-day activities. You must be the one who controls the direction of the business. You must take responsibility for any mistakes or problems that occur. Britain's
Oh my god, these are painful. These are so painful. If academic agents saw this today, he'd call you a socialist, huh? Okay, let's see here. We jump ahead a few days, I suppose. What is feminism? This is just him picking apart some nice people just talking about a thing.
When you're a girl and you say, not that I'm a feminist or anything.
Alright, genius, I'll stop you there. Why do you think they say that? It's because feminists are generally massively unpleasant people to be around. No one wants to be a massively unpleasant person to be around, and for some reason feminists can't seem to see how unpopular they are. And so they get in everyone's shit, and they're like, blah, 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 you must do this my way, you must do this way, blah, 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 blah. And everyone's like, look, fuck off. And that's why women, even women, say, I'm not a feminist, but I need to say something that objectively needs to be said. Let's say the rest of this really well thought out, I want to say treatise, but I don't want to confuse you.
It makes you sound stupid.
I'd like to thank the fat girl on the right for proving my point.
Really, if you're any
We don't want to be unpleasant.
gender and you say that you're not a feminist, it just makes you sound uneducated.
The word you're looking for is indoctrinated, and that's right, Ginger Kid, hang your head.
And here's why. Because feminism, the definition of it is just believing that women are human beings.
No, it isn't. Dictionary.com defines it as the doctrine advocating social, political, and all other rights of women equal to those of men. What's missing from that? Children, obviously. Children do not get the right to involve themselves in politics. They do not get the right to dictate their own...
But they will get them, regardless of gender now, here, as a result of feminist changes to our politics, right? Children are minors. They don't remain children forever. That's why they're children. Dear God.
socialize, at least until a later age, and yet they are still considered human. This means you're wrong. What we are talking about really is social equality. And if you're looking for social equality for all genders, then What you want is a word called egalitarianism. Words have meanings, genius.
And if you don't think that a woman is a human being, then
You'd say maybe that they were taxonomically misinformed and that they should have a good day?
how do I say go kill yourself nicely?
Page 57, paragraph 6, word 8 of Mein Kampf. I've never heard a non-feminist say that to anyone. It's only feminists who say, if you don't agree, kill yourself. This is why people don't want to be associated with feminism. Alright, Ginger Kid, pull us back from the brink of madness.
It's true.
Is it?
I mean, like, that's something that I've sort of always thought of as obvious.
Yes, everyone thinks it's obvious that women are human beings. Get to your point.
And, like, I don't talk about me being a feminist.
I'll try to contain my surprise, and look at this picture. Look at the way she's looking at him. Look at the fear in his eyes. My God, boy,
This is... Carl has some kind of complex going on, dear God. Perfectly normal face, she looks to the side with a half smile, and horrific images of being brutally dominated flash through his head immediately.
really, really hope you have memorized your lines right. I really fucking do. Because she's watching. She's waiting for you to say the wrong thing.
Because I don't feel like if I was like going around saying I'm a feminist, that's almost a form of misogyny.
I don't even know what to say to that. A man promoting women's issues is now misogyny.
Hang on, I lost the context there because he cut it up so much.
To say to that. Watching your lines. She's waiting for you to say the wrong thing.
Because
Well, no, because they agreed to do a video together, so he would have known in advance what they were going to talk about, and that they can splice out whatever it is he says if it's incorrect, and same with her. They probably didn't use the first take they did, like you did, Carl, with your phone and your Gerberator.
I don't feel like if I was like going around saying I'm a feminist, that's almost a form of misogyny.
I don't even know what to say to that. A man promoting women's issues is now misogyny. I'm baffled by you. Do you know what Stockholm Syndrome is?
It's trying to be like, look at me, ladies. I think you should be treated equal. Like, you don't even need to mention it. It's just common sense.
Right.
One of our old English professors said that saying you don't need to be a woman to be a feminist and that you can be a male feminist. Then she goes, right, Ben? And I was like, right. I was surprised, but I was flattered.
We don't even need to talk about it. Why are we making a video? Oh, I think I know. Let's have a look at this picture. That's right, Ginger Kid. Hang your head. You can smile, though, because you've got your lines right. You're not going to get chewed out this time. And look at her. She's winning. She's happy as anything. You are right where you're supposed to be. That's a good boy.
Okay, so let's go over feminism. Feminism comes in 3 waves, in the educational sense.
As opposed to the literal sense of women washing up on a shore?
The first wave is like in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
Hang on. In what sense did she say?
Okay, so let's go over feminism. Feminism comes in 3 waves, in the educational sense.
As opposed to the literal sense?
Well, no, she said educational sense, not metaphorical sense. So I'm assuming what she refers to is this is either an educational shorthand of periodization that maybe doesn't track stuff really super accurately, but is useful for educating purposes, or she's referring to, I suppose, periodization of sort of educational moves within feminism, so that the ideas that people are being educated with were shifting. I'm not entirely certain about that language, but she didn't say in the metaphorical sense. The weird thirstiness to just get them on every little turn of phrase is bizarre. Like, there's something just sadly desperate about this.
So, women washing up on a shore?
The first wave is like in the late 1800s, early 1900s with women's suffrage. This happened primarily in like the UK and the US, other developed countries where women wanted to gain the right to vote and the right to own property. And that was their main focus, was getting those rights.
As painful as that was to listen to as an explanation of anything, women have always had the right to own property. At
What?
least in Anglosphere societies.
That's not true. That's just flat out... What the fuck is he talking about? What is he talking... That's not true.
Second wave feminism is probably the most, like,
Hang on, let's actually find, like, a time period for this. Women, property, ownership... what do we want to see? Just European. Let's go broad, okay? How long have women had the right to own property? Property in the sense of land is what's important here, not just having possessions. Yeah, so during the colonial period, most of the newly formed American states followed British common law, which stipulated husbands had complete control of any property their wives brought into the marriage in a trust. This ban on female property ownership in 18th century England is a major plot device in many Jane Austen novels, and popular TV shows like Downton Abbey and Bridgerton depicted daughters barred from inheriting their father's estate. By the late 1700s, some states had begun moving towards granting women limited property rights. New York was among the first, passing an act in 1771 that gave women a voice in how husbands managed their joint assets. The act, to confirm certain ancient conveyances and directing the manner of proving deeds to be recorded, required the wife's signature on any deed to property she brought into the marriage in a trust before her husband could sell or otherwise transfer it. Significantly, it stipulated a judge must meet privately with the wife to confirm her approval was not coerced. Although women were still not allowed to own property independently, for the first time they had some say in how it was managed. Soon after, Maryland and Massachusetts followed suit, expanding limited property rights laws to include women. In 1787, Massachusetts began allowing some married women to conduct business on their own, so wives of merchants or traders could continue running the family shop while their seafaring husbands were, seafaring husbands were absent. And, of course, when you go to women of color, it becomes an entirely different story. This is comical. But no, according to Carl, women have always had rights to property in the Anglosphere. By the way, this is like America and England. The root of this is British common law. You'll notice I'm not having any alcohol today. It's because I can only lose so many brain cells in a sitting. This is unreal.
Typical feminist that you think of with, like, burning bras, going into the workforce, wanting equal rights, the equal rights
We can
amendment.
do it. Right?
No, that's from World War II.
Oh.
Third wave feminism is what's happening right now, and it's really hard to peg down.
I'm pretty sure I know why. It's because all of the actual legitimate objectives of feminism have been achieved. Everything you listed there has been achieved. So what is left?
Because I think partially because we don't have the knowledge of looking in the past like we do with first wave and second wave.
Do you mean hindsight?
So third wave...
Yes, that's what she means, Carl. She means hindsight. And more specifically, what is meant here is likely that these disputes that are taking place within the intellectual milieu of contemporary feminism, at least when this was recorded, I presume within the span of roughly 9 years ago, like when this video was, these were still open. And so the outcomes and what sort of defines the movement or the state of things after the fact has not yet been settled. And so it's difficult to go back and talk about, like, this is what it ultimately represented, because these were arguments. There were arguments prior. What a movement is partially defined by what it becomes and what it does over time. So if this thing is still ongoing, if it's not settled, if it's not over and dead, then it's hard to say exactly what it is, because you're trying to understand it in its historical context, and its historical context is not complete because the thing isn't concluded yet.
Feminism focuses more on women of color and how the idea of femininity is not just in a small little cube, but it is everything. It is a big circle of everything. So, and it's not just focused on white upper class women, which is what first wave and second wave really was about.
Why would you subscribe to an ideology that comes from roots that you acknowledge to be classist and racist?
Well, let's think this through, Carl. You call yourself a classical liberal at various points in your career. What does that come from? Exactly.
The Third Reich was bad, but the Fourth Reich is going to be much better.
Can I like this video, Merrick? No, but I can absolutely link it to you. I will let you steal my glory.
We can't actually form an adequate description of what the Fourth Reich is going to be like.
By the way, Sunday, some of Carl's deleted vids are on Web Archive. Send me a link on Twitter, Reality, could you? That would be interesting to look at. Just, we'll have to be careful. They might be delisted from YouTube because we're not allowed to play them anymore, so...
So we'll just make this shit up as we go along.
So it's more encompassing of all women, all types of women, and all types of femininity. And it's hard to define because it's still going on right now.
Are you deluded or just massively brainwashed?
She said exactly what I said at the end, so that's what she means. Still going on, hasn't been settled, the nature of the thing in its full historical context is not yet known.
I said earlier, a movement that emphasizes one sex over another is not calling for equality. You are not talking...
You're welcome, Merrick. By the way, if you ever want to join me for any one of these things, this would be so much less painful with company.
...about men there. You are not even slightly concerned with men. Everything you just said was about women. Every single goddamn thing. So when you say, well, we're actually just talking about equality for everyone, no, you're fucking not. You're only talking about women.
Yeah, because women have fewer rights and are dealing with the social detritus of having fewer rights for an extensive period of time. So the correction that needs to be made is on that end. That's a pretty elementary point. When you're balancing out two glasses, you don't continue to pour equally into both.
And when one group focused on at the expense of all others, what's that called? I can't trust you to come to the right answer on your own. It's called privilege, alright? It's called privilege.
So would you consider yourself to be a third wave feminist?
I don't know. I'm just a feminist.
A term so vague, it's got 3 definitions that you're not even sure of.
Well, I mean, you call yourself a classical liberal. There are so many different variations of liberal. The essence of which, in the configuration that Sargon is familiar with, because I guarantee you he has not understood Hobbes, is going to be rooting your political identity and your political existence, your social existence, and your capacity to own and manage property.
You don't know. You're just someone who's looking to enhance the privilege of women over everyone else in society. That's it. That's all you are. You're just someone who's out to improve the lives of women, and what a surprise.
Like how women lost abortion rights President Sunday? No, that doesn't count. See, the problem is when they lose rights, they're the ones that don't count. That's how it works here.
You are a woman. It's almost like you are using this entirely for your own self-interest.
Because I believe that women can be whatever they want.
Self-obsessed, narcissistic, fascist powermongers? Why would anyone want to be that? I can only assume that you are that because you aren't aware that that's how you are.
I believe you don't have to shave
Indeed, Carl, indeed.
your legs, but if you do, fine.
The one thing holding us back from true equality.
If you want to wear a dress like I am today, cool. If you want to wear jeans, cool. If you want to look like a guy, cool.
Yeah, fucking groovy. So fucking what?
I don't care. Be whatever you want to be.
Judge not, lest ye be judged? Is that what you're trying to say?
I think she said, I don't care, just be whatever you want to be, Carl.
It's sort of like a reawakening of
Right.
sexuality, a reclaiming, I guess.
These people are so nice. They're just giving a description of an idea for educational purposes, and just Carl's just raging in his toilet with his recorder pen.
And that's
You're
another
right
big thing
to-
about third wave feminism, is that it's like a sexual, like you said, reawakening and claiming sex as power and whatever, and that it's okay to be a sexual being.
I haven't paused it on this frame to get a funny shot of her seductive face. I've done it to get a funny shot of his look of abject terror at her unleashing her sexuality anywhere near him.
So stop saying that you're not a feminist.
Jawohl, mein Führer.
If you believe that you're a human being and that you have the right to be whatever you want to be, then you're a feminist.
No, we've already covered this. The term is egalitarianist.
I deal with people in Discord like this all the time, and they're the absolute worst. I don't know, how did this guy get to this? He's brain dead. Like he's just a nutball. He's just like a raging nutball.
What you don't understand is that no amount of doublethink will change that. You know, you can say everyone's a feminist because everyone believes in equal rights.
But it's such like a weak rage too. Like there's nothing satisfying about it. Like I'm trying to picture myself sympathizing with him, and amazingly I can't, because I used to watch his stuff. Granted, not 9 years ago. Maybe he changes substantially over 3 years. I rather hope so for my sake. But dear God, like this is just embarrassing.
But that will still not make them feminists. Do you understand? You are pushing the supremacy of one gender over another by your own admission in this video. From a racist, classist, quite clearly divisionist ideology, and you want people who are not part of your club to die. I would fight you on a battlefield if you took the field. I would be actively in arms against you if it came to civil war.
I know, it seems like at this point there shouldn't be any non-feminists left in the
Right.
world. I think people probably don't understand what it really means, but
Yes, 2 of them in this fucking video, because you're unable to actually define what you are talking about. What kind of bored collective is this? Everyone must think our way, because how could you think any other way? What way do you think? Well, we can't exactly tell you, but you need to think our way. You're fucking mad.
if there are legitimately people out there who are like, no, feminism is wrong, then they either don't know what they're talking about, or wow.
We've established that no one knows what they're actually talking about when they're talking about feminism. You have established that in this video by 2 self-confessed, dyed-in-the-wool, die-hard feminists who can't even define their own movement. Fucking wow indeed. I'm wow. I am wow that you can actually hold an opinion on something.
Carl is wow. Okay. We get the idea here. What are we going to look at next? Weimar America. The ethical state. The ethical state. Trying to decide between Weimar America and the ethical state. I'm going to go with Weimar America. I'm a little interested in this one. I'm going to run to the washroom quickly. Oh, see, like, look at this. Look how much work went into supplying the channel that we just saw with an intro. Look at this. I'm pretty sure that soundbite is actually from, so I never played a game, I think it was a Half-Life 1 mod called They Hunger 3. I'm almost certain the audio is either from that or is from something in Half-Life 1. Because I remember this from that. This is what 2 far-left activists want, and he has a smiling person with glasses, because that's That is what a far-left activist looks like, I suppose. If you're sort of brown-colored and you have glasses, there you go. I'll be right back. I'm going to run ads, and we will continue. press on. What do far-left activists want? 27 minutes long. We won't necessarily go through the whole thing. We'll just get a taste.
So I found a series of short interviews from a minor far-left activist.
Oh god, that is so much. This is 5 years ago. So in the span of 4 years, he went from being basically inaudible to a crazy person rambling in a laundry room somewhere, to something passable, actually. This is an ugly background. This is like, it's sort of like Mr. Girl's background, but just awful. It just looks awful, I'm sorry. It's fuzzy, it's smeared, it's just, ugh.
That I'll put in all in this video, and I think it'll give us a real insight into her worldview.
Right, I'm here in Peckham with Antonia Bright from Movement for Justice.
Yep, by any means necessary.
By any means necessary.
Yeah.
So something I've noticed recently is that the term by any means necessary appears to have been popularised in the far left, as if they think that they are a bunch of violent revolutionaries and they think this is all justified. And I only say this because it's always followed by like a knowing smile.
By any means necessary.
By any means necessary.
Yeah.
So I talked to you a while ago about Brexit, and how's Brexit for you now?
It's as it was. It is still motivated, driving racism and driven by racism.
But Europeans are white. I mean, it would make more sense to say xenophobia, wouldn't it?
Driven by anti-immigrant bigotry.
Oh, I see what he's doing. Okay, I had to process that for a second. I mean, first of all, no, Europeans are not categorically white, but moreover, a major part of the impetus for Brexit was that there was a terror of refugees and migrants. So, not just xenophobic, also racist, because they are xenophobic towards particular kinds of people on the basis of skin color and culture, which is associated with skin color, or inferred by skin color is more accurate to say, I think.
Well, there's no doubt that immigration was a hot-button issue when it came to Brexit, and mass immigration in general is definitely something that the working classes in this country have had enough of. They certainly are tired of dealing with the consequences of it. I really wouldn't go as far as to call this a form of bigotry, because I think she's deliberately trying to conflate this with racism. But I think I'll give her that. People do want less immigration.
And with
God, his editing still sucks. He was a big channel by this point, too. His editing is just garbage.
To stop Brexit.
Why? There was a democratic referendum. It was decided that we would leave the European Union by the majority of the country. What's the problem?
We... The biggest issue of Brexit was always the attack on immigration.
For people in the north of England, where mass immigration has been a severe and significant issue, for people in the south, they were more concerned about sovereignty. But what I find really confusing about this is the commitment to immigration. Why? What difference does it make to this person if people are allowed to immigrate to this country en masse or not?
Well, here's a big one, all right? Karl characterizes himself as a classical liberal. And I've said this many times, but for those who are not familiar, who have not read Locke, as Karl insists that we almost do, there is a critical part that's understated in Locke's second treatise on government. That is on tacit consent. So, in basically all forms of liberal ideology, the legitimacy of the ruling authorities of the magistrate is because it is downstream from the consent of those they govern. This is one of the reasons why in Hobbes it's critical that the origin of the state, of the Commonwealth, is in the social contract. Why? Because it means that every single member of a society is a part of that society and subject to its rules by choice, so that the enforcement of those rules upon them isn't an injustice. In Locke, he takes pains to point out that if someone is unable to pack up their things and relocate to the domain of a different sovereign of their choosing, the authorities over them do not have the legitimacy that comes from their being so situated by the consent of the governed. Why? Because you cannot consent to be governed if you cannot choose your sovereign. If your sovereign is imposed upon you without any possibility for choice, then you're not choosing to be ruled by he who rules you. That is simply forced upon you, and you can benefit by obeying the rules or suffer for naught. But you cannot derive legitimacy from consent in that case. This is important because he's trying to answer the question of, well, like, let's look at Hobbes. Social contract way back in the past, right? Doesn't even exist, really, but way back in the past. Let's pretend for argument's sake that it did. We didn't enter into a social contract. We weren't in a state of nature. We didn't, like, meet up together in some place in the woods and say, like, hey, I'll give up my right to take your things if you do the same to me, and then we can pool our resources together and organize a body to enforce those over all of us so that no one of us can just betray the other and betray the contract and just, run off with all our goods and maybe try to do it again elsewhere with some other unwitting saps in a different place. How do you get to the consent of the governed when people are born into a society that's already established with rules and whatnot? Well, through the notion of tacit consent. You need to be able to leave, so that if you choose not to, or if you don't choose to leave, you are by so doing tacitly consenting to the rule of the sovereign of the place that you're in. And that way you can maintain the consent of the governed while having a situation where nobody alive within that state has actually explicitly signed on to the rules or to the authorities that enforce them in that space. So this would be why Karl, if he actually was a liberal and wasn't just a very, very confused fascist, should be very much against immigration restrictions on the basis of nationality, ethnicity, religion, etc., like he seems to be.
And it's a catch-all. It's like a scapegoat that means being able to drive through an awful lot of dreadful policies and so on.
I've already watched these videos once, and as far as I can recall, we never get to find out what dreadful policies she's talking about.
Do you think he used to think this guy was a genius? Okay, look, in my defense, I never thought this guy was a genius. Ever. Ever. I did think he wasn't a moron, which I am very ashamed to admit. Dear God. It's weird, though, how fast you can change when you actually try to learn stuff. I found, it wasn't pro-Trump, but I found a tweet. Actually, somebody else found a tweet, and they dug it up. From, just 2 years ago, actually, 2020, which is kind of astonishing to me. In which, what did I say exactly? It was, there was some tweet by some person or some media channel or whatever that was going after Donald Trump for saying the F word. Because, it's like, and like people were stupid about how they treated Trump. Like, oh, he eats a steak with ketchup or something. Like, that's dumb. But I replied, like, previous president bombed more civilians than anyone in history, and people who tweet out hashtag shout your abortion are going nuts, losing their minds because Donald Trump said the F word. Like the tone of that's not something I would say at all today. It's strange to see. I had actually completely forgotten about that. And that was only 2 years ago. It's weird. It's really weird. Now this is from 5 years ago. That would have been, where would I have been then? Where would I have been in my education then? I must have been 16. I was at least in second year then. Like it's weird. When you actually try, and you try to understand things and you try to learn things, you change very rapidly. Like the gains, as it were, they're real. What's really disturbing about people like this is that they aren't just sort of dumbly advocating for things to a dumb audience. They're also agitating against like people who are trying to educate the population, right? Trying to educate people. His previous few videos were literally just some random douchebag just screaming almost incoherently into a terrible mic at someone who dared to try and explain something that was important to them in language that wasn't pleasing to him at the time. And it seems like that's all he's ever done. He hasn't grown. His equipment's gotten better. He's made more money. But there's no intellectual development here. There's nothing. See, look at this. A look inside the rambling mind of a far-left, open borders, anti-racist activist. Being open borders isn't far-left. Being open borders is liberal. There was a time at which it was actually very hotly debated whether or not the passport system, or what would become the passport system, was ethically permissible. Because while people in favor of it argued that, I mean, among other things, some were more open about it than others. Among other things, it prevented undesirables within the British Empire from dwelling with white Brits, or white subjects rather. Others would say like, well, the passport system ensures that people who travel from India primarily for work, we know that they're not being taken advantage of, that they're literate, that they understand their contracts, This was hotly debated because as British subjects, Indians had the right to traverse the territories of the empire at will. This was the right of a British subject, which they were. Now, why they were British subjects is a whole other issue, and that wasn't just. But as British subjects, they had the right. By insisting upon paperwork and additional conditions of travel, besides like just the material reality of having to pay for the actual travel itself, the ideal of tacit consent was undermined. You lost the ability to say, you are ruled in this place by your own consent, and therein lies the legitimacy of the magistrate. No more. Now you live in a conquered territory. You're nominally a British subject, but now you live in a conquered territory, and you cannot leave unless they give you extra permission to do so. Open borders is right-wing. No, open borders is liberal. Liberalism predates right-wing and left-wing.
But it's the concentration of racism and anti-immigrant bigotry that we are seeing around us, not just in Britain, but around Europe, in the US. An idea that, utilizing the scapegoating of immigrants, by the right to drive through.
Doesn't go with colloquial understanding of left Democrat and right Republican. I know, but that doesn't go that's not even colloquial all over the place. There aren't Republicans in Canada, for instance.
The kind of division and cuts and attacks and driving down of living standards that we're seeing.
Okay, so
I think people in Hobbes' time had nowhere to go. It was subjugation, not tacit. Well, Hobbes doesn't have a notion of tacit consent. Well, he does sort of. So, for instance, if you accept slavery as opposed to death in Hobbes to a conqueror, he would consider you to have consented to their rule, because you could have chosen to die instead. Which is, not particularly compelling if you find yourself in a situation of slavery, I imagine, but there it is.
Division, cuts, and attacks are the things that she's objecting to. Well, things would probably be less divisive if you were to understand why people in the North particularly are objecting to mass immigration. If you could find your way to empathizing with these people, then perhaps this would be less of a divisive issue, because you would be on the same side as them. The Bank of England did a 2015 study to see whether there was an impact on wages through mass immigration, and they found that there was. The problem is that this was hidden, because when you take in aggregate all of the wages for all of the people in the country, it's very hard to find any particular impact. But when you break it down into occupational groups, you find that the groups with the poorest people...
This paper asks whether immigration to Britain has had any impact on average wages. There seems to be a broad consensus among academics that the share of immigrants in the workforce has little or no effect on native wages. These studies typically have not refined their analysis by breaking it down into different occupational groups. Our contribution is to extend the existing literature on immigration to include occupations as well. We find the immigrant to native ratio has a small negative impact on average British wages. This finding is important for monetary policymakers who are interested in the impact that supply shocks such as immigration have on average wages and overall inflation. Our results also reveal that the biggest impact of immigration on wages is within the semi-unskilled services occupational group. We also investigate if there is any differential impact. You know what you can do, Carl, is you can legislate wages, right? These findings accord well with intuition and anecdotal evidence, but have not been recorded previously in the empirical literature. Does he have an explanation for... let's look at the transcript here. Stephen Nicol and Jumana Salahin. Let's see. What's the history behind this article? Stephen Nicol, Jumana Salahin. Impact of immigration on occupational wages. Evidence from Britain. This was published in 2015. Okay, so when he says hidden, he must mean hidden in the data. Here, let's look at this actually. Let's use okay. Okay, so the contribution of this paper to the existing literature is twofold. First, it considers the impact of immigration on average wages rather than on native wages. There's no way in hell he's read this. Just going to read its conclusions. This paper asks whether immigration has any impact on wages. It answers this question by considering the variation of wages and immigration across regions, occupations, and time. Occupations turn out to be a relatively important dimension. Once the occupational breakdown is incorporated into a regional analysis of immigration, the immigrant-native ratio has a significant small impact on the average occupational wage rates of that region. Closer examination reveals the biggest effect is in the semi-unskilled services sector, where a 10 percentage point rise in the proportion of immigrants is associated with a 2% reduction in pay. This is obvious because you have an increased saturation of the labor pool. Where immigrants come from, EU or non-EU, appears to have no impact on our economy-wide results, with the impact within the semi-unskilled services sector being small. These findings accord well with intuition and anecdotal evidence, but do not seem to have been recorded previously in the empirical literature. Right. So that's kind of obvious. Alright, that was boring. Anyways, can return to this, I suppose.
People such as the semi and unskilled services occupational group receive the biggest impact on wages.
They say it's a significant but small impact on wages.
There is actually a net decrease in their wages because of mass immigration, because of supply and demand. Because if you bring over millions of unskilled workers to compete with the native unskilled workers,
semi-skilled, and
that naturally drives down their earning potential, reducing their standard of living. So mass immigration does indeed affect the living standards of the poorest people in our society.
It's interesting how he's reflexively characterizing immigrants as non-members of the community. When they've come in and they've been ratified as members of the state, as subjects of the state, then they are subjects. They're not competing with British people. They are, for all intents and purposes, British people. Now, obviously, like an increase in the population is going to create a situation where you have, I guess, less leverage as a job seeker, because there are more job seekers, so people could be more choosy. But that's all that means. It's better for Carl if he doesn't read it. All he has to do is spin the title and his audience nods along and doesn't check. Yeah. Carlos Swindon is boring. This is well out of my area of expertise, but I also know it's out of Carl's. And I also know he hasn't actually read the paper, so that's frustrating. Because their language is very, very specific and very modest. They say the biggest effect is in the semi/unskilled services sector. Okay, so it includes, well, I mean, these are two sectors combined, aren't they? This is semi-skilled. Where a 10 percentage point rise in the proportion of immigrants is associated with a 2% reduction in pay. But then there are easy solutions to that which you aren't considering because you're a stooge of the businesses ultimately. There we go. Let's look at this. We find that the ratio of EU to non-EU... Oh, this is... There we go. We find that the ratio of EU to non-EU immigrants has a very small impact on wages and is only significant in the dynamic model, which we didn't look at. The table tells us that a 10% rise in immigration and constant EU non-EU immigration ratio would lower overall wages by 0.33%. But if a 10% rise in immigration was such that the EU/non-EU immigrant share also rose by 10%, overall wages would likely fall by 0.31%. These differences are tiny. It tells us that impact of immigration on wages is driven mainly by the overall total stock of immigration, with its composition, EU versus non-EU, having a second-order impact. Yeah, okay.
So it is completely rational that the poor people in our society would be opposed to mass immigration, and not for reasons that are racist. And this is not even taking into account the social problems that these immigrant groups bring.
And saying that immigrants are the problem and utilising that is just allowing so much of a degradation to our society.
This puts her in direct conflict with the working class in this country, who find the effects of mass immigration to be degradation to their own living standards. And we do have a...
What he means by social problems is contributions to crime and being Islamic and all those sorts of things. That's something we'll be focusing on in the next section. I should have done the Weimar one first, because this one's going to be more appropriate to that, because we're going to look at the debate with Michael Brooks. In fact, I almost want to save this one for that, because I intended to click on the Weimar America one, not this one. I clicked on it, so I just went with it. Let's do that. Let's save this one for when we go over the Michael Brooks thing, because he's going to go over... that's what we're going to touch on, the stuff on Islam and immigration and whatnot. Because that's the whole Sharia law argument. That's going to be more thematically appropriate. So this is Weimar America. This is from 2017. This is much more recently. No, actually, this one's from, I think, the same year.
There's recently been a great media furor over Donald Trump's response to the Charlottesville violence, where the alt-right and Antifa and various other leftist groups had violent physical conflict, and someone ended up getting killed in a car ramming. This was Donald Trump's initial response.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides.
Donald Trump was absolutely correct to say that this violence was being done on many sides, because it is. However, the media seem to have been afflicted by a temporary lapse in memory, so I'm going to remind them very briefly now exactly what he's talking about. This is Antifa, and Antifa can broadly be termed communists.
I remember this. Yeah, this was bad. So anybody remember Bike Lock Guy? Back when this was going on, I had a video response to Philosophy Tube back then. There were a lot of people on YouTube even like extremely moderate people like Philosophy Tube really were capitalizing on this by sort of signaling approval of just random acts of completely pointless and self-aggrandizing violence by just randos who wanted to look cool. This was like an ethics professor or something who just showed up in a mask and just slugged some random guy with a bike lock. Like what's the purpose? What's your opinion on bike lockage? I think this is probably one of the most stupid and sinister things I've ever seen done by just a generally left-wing activist. This is stupid. There's literally no purpose or advantage in doing this, and this has been used to great effect for a very long time to cast left-wingers to a very large part of the population as insane, frothing at the mouth violence fetishists, which is not the case, but unfortunately, people weren't really thinking very carefully about... People weren't thinking about the importance of not looking like the scariest thing around when your political opponents have control over some of the most powerful media apparati in human history. So what you had when this was all going down was someone like PhilosophyTube sort of giving tacit approval, or just generally approval, of the activities of Antifa generally, making no distinctions between stuff like this and other forms of activism and anti-fascist action. Slugging this random person with a bike lock saved 0 lives. Solved 0 problems. It was a propaganda goldmine for right-wingers ever since it happened. And it continues to be. So, this was only stupid. And it's worse, too, because the person who did it ended up having an institutional position, so this could be linked in with public education. Or not public education, this could be linked in with the university. So it strengthened the basically anti-academic prejudice of people on the right. It was so weird that so many people fell behind the bike lock guy wasn't so bad line, when that is more optically damaging, not to mention ethically reprehensible, than just condemning the guy. Yeah. Yeah, and by the way, like, you don't have to condemn all political violence categorically to condemn the bike lock guy. The issue with the bike lock guy isn't that he engaged in political violence. The issue with the bike lock guy is that he engaged in violence for no discernible reason against someone without any justification. Like, pulling down a statue, breaking down a door, damaging police equipment, stuff like that. Like, there are conditions in which that's effective political action. Slugging this guy with a bike lock, there isn't one. This guy wasn't important until he was slugged with a bike lock. You even had Vosh looking at the camera and going like, guys, don't engage in violence. It was bad. A lot of people made a lot of money defending this, though. And we are still living with the consequences, because the kinds of people who will sort of cynically glamorize or validate this because it makes a certain clique of people feel powerful and will make them subscribe and donate and all that stuff, they are not the kind of people who are actually radical and stay on side once they've gotten rich doing it. They fall back, and they protect what they've gained. So this is why people like ContraPoints went on to start lambasting the envy of the poor in anti-rich rhetoric during COVID. Remember that video, Envy? Once again, Sunday, he wasn't some random person. He was someone who was involved in brawls earlier that day. Of course, somebody came and retaliated. If it was outside of the brawl, it doesn't matter. Like, was he somebody who engaged in brawls earlier that day? Okay, but that does not make it a politically wise move to then attempt to murder the person in a crowd later on. That doesn't work, right? If there was a brawl going on, and during that brawl, somebody got slugged in the head by something, that'd be one thing. This guy's standing there docile, and this person sneaks up to him and just hits him with a lock and a sock, like a blackjack. This basically amounts to attempted murder. See that? They're not fighting right now. He's just standing there. This guy in a mask sneaks up with a bike lock. Like, there's no justifying this, I'm sorry. There's no purpose, and there's no justifying it besides. This is literally just a random act of personal vengeance, if indeed there was a brawl earlier. This doesn't accomplish anything. And once again, this has been externally, it made him look innocent. Yeah, exactly. And in addition, it made him look like a victim because he was, unfortunately. It doesn't actually matter if he was in a brawl earlier. That doesn't allow this person in particular to sneak up with a weapon and try to execute him. Oh my god, we must condemn every bar fight and fight at a football game because some dude got hit with a bike lock during a political confrontation at a college campus. Give me I don't know what the hell you're talking about. No, you condemn this thing because it's selfish and dangerous and accomplishes nothing. That's why. Like, are you defending this? Like, explain. FTW all day, do you want to come on and chat about this? I'm a little bit perplexed by your stance here. Execute? Yes, execute. Do you know what happens if you smash a heavy metal object of about this size into someone's skull? Well, there are many possibilities, actually. Quite a few of them result in them either being severely brain damaged or dead. Yeah, FTW, I'd like to chat with you about this, so if you have access to a microphone, I'd like you to come on tonight, because I want to understand your reasoning here. See this? Who is this person? I don't know who this person is. Look at this. There's a guy flat on the ground. Why are you hitting him?
The left.
I don't even know who those people are, so I can't say one way or I can't even say who it is that was doing that. But like, if those were political activists doing that, and that was just a random civilian, even if he was in a brawl earlier or something like that, like, maybe you'll go, oh, no tears shed. He was like a brute who was bullying people physically earlier, but you don't also thereby say that doing that was a good idea. Bro, I rode only a bike for 6 years. Those U-locks are basically just hammers. Yeah. Yeah. Sure, but I don't think people should be clutching their pearls when the same level of violence happen at all kinds of venues every night and day in the United States. Okay, here's what you need to get to your head, FTW. You feeling like it's irrational pearl clutching for people to be reacting super negatively to that does not change the fact that people react super negatively to that, and then people will be terrified by this uncontextualized event, which can be used to great effect propagandistically, into voting for someone like Donald Trump, who promises to do away with people in institutional positions of power, who encourage, or in this case, engage in that kind of behavior. That's the problem. We're not talking about, like, policing our tone so that we aren't spooking away liberals with transgenocide language. We're talking about displays of actual direct and very much seemingly random violence against civilians by by a political movement that some of the most powerful media centers in the world are actively trying to discredit. This was bad, and defending this was really bad. This happened at a protest with cameras around. Hitting that guy with the lock was a brain-dead move. Yeah, it was. Whether it looks bad or not, it was still reckless and dangerous and wrong. Yeah, I would agree with that. Once again, like, the bare fact that this guy was in a brawl earlier, that doesn't matter. FTW, are you coming on, or are you just defending this and then disappearing? Voosh wasn't even around as a streamer back then, lol. No, but he referred to this kind of thing later on. Apparently only revolutionary anarchists ever get into brawls and fistfights, lol. Okay, here's where you're not thinking, okay? Welcome to grown-up land. It being fair has no currency. None. Here's the situation. You have a massively powerful and moneyed set of media institutions that will take that footage of this one person engaging in a brawl. Not engaging in a brawl, actually. It's far worse than that. Of taking a piece of metal, putting it into a piece of fabric, walking up to what looks like a student with a backpack, while he's not engaged in combat, seems to be standing docilely talking to people and not looking at you, and smashing him when he's not looking on the top of the head. And that's all they see. And then it comes out later, you're an employee of the university or of a university or an ethics professor, and now all of a sudden, two really useful things have been achieved by your political enemies. First of all, the immediate movement of which you were a part, or the immediate event of which you were a part, and the people who are aesthetically associated with you there, other people with similar colors or who were arguing on a different side, they now get looped in with this particular action as if this is generic to them. And then in addition, because he was identified later as an employee of a university, now academic critics of right-wing policies and things of that sort, they now get looped in with that person as well. You've now just publicly discredited everyone on your side, just like that. What did you get in exchange? One random guy who nobody cares about, I don't think anyone even remembers his name, has a severe concussion and either dies or, if he's lucky, has a very bad headache for a few weeks. Well done. Congratulations. Vive la revolution.
Wing journalists, who invariably identify as a form of socialist, are naturally remarkably sympathetic to communists, and so they have pounced on Donald Trump, not because he has condemned, rightly so, both groups of racialized collectivists, but because he failed to denounce in strident and explicit terms the particular group that these racial collectivists hate, their antithesis, their enemy.
Well, yeah, Nazis, one of which drove a car into protesters and killed one. Now, once again, and this is why it's actually important to not be engaging in reckless violence for no reason. Political violence is very important. All politics is violent at some level, but you need to do it for reasons. The bare fact that politics is violence doesn't mean that all violence is wise. And doing unwise action is ceding the ground to your political enemies, which is basically doing their work. Now, this does not mean that every form of action in which the outcome is uncertain, or in which somebody can imagine a situation in which that can be used maliciously by your political opponents, that's therefore invalid. But you still have to be careful. Let's look at the transgenocide language as an example. There's a particular reason why you want to use the language of transgenocide, not just because it's accurate, but because the response to it is different, and it sets the threshold for action at a different level. If you insist there's no transgenocide, there's just like a breakdown of some social gains made for trans people, that does not spur people to action in the same way as the language of transgenocide does. It's also less accurate because there's actually been a transgenocide going on since before we had a notion since before we recognized the category of trans people, because they were institutionally required to be sterilized before they were even separated out as their own group. So there is a long-standing history of things that needs to be addressed, as well as a sliding back into a much worse situation that is commonly acknowledged. There's a particular reason for that. By contrast, random act of violence against someone who you have had an altercation with in a crowd at some point earlier on. Maybe it was even entirely their fault. Maybe they started it. Okay, you see them in a crowd elsewhere. You have a bike lock. You have a mask that can get away with it. You sneak up on them and you smash them over the top of the head. What is the benefit of doing that? What do you get? Anyone in the chat, what do you get? Give me an example. Name one gain you get from this. Like, here's a question. If you're going to go that far, why not just shoot the guy? Because at least then you could argue, like, well, one less fascist. That's stupid. It doesn't get you anything. Except that. But, like, okay, I can sort of conceptualize that. All you've accomplished by smashing this person in the head is you felt really big for a few seconds, and you've become a massive iceberg-sized liability for everybody else around you who is actually taking this seriously. And you probably will end up in prison. So, well done. You're just gone, and you've ruined it for everybody else. You would have to see the brawl that broke out in Sacramento at the Capitol months before the fight at Berkeley. Indeed. And that's the problem, isn't it? You would have to see that. But people don't see that. Again, fairness has no currency. Life's not fair. Get used to it.
So Donald Trump, and rightly so, doubled down on what he had originally said.
When you say the alt-right, define alt-right to me. You define it. Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying,
define it for me. Come on, let's go.
Senator McCain defined them as the same group.
Okay, what about the alt-left that came charging at him? Excuse me. What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt?
This is Senator McCain's statement.
Let me ask you this. What about the fact they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do.
What he's referring to is, I can't remember their names, but the driver of the truck that drove through the protesters and ran over one of the activists, killing her. There were a bunch of people in the crowd around carrying clubs and bats and things of that sort. And when he started accelerating through, they charged the truck and started breaking its windows and whatnot. And I believe they were beating it before. I can't quite remember those, so don't quote me on that. As a consequence of the optics of that, there was in the popular imagination this notion of a generalized left-wing movement that was identical in its tactics and in its ethics to the alt-right, which there really wasn't. But it only took a few people doing something stupid to give some very dishonest people with a lot of power all the tools they needed to make people think that. Because I don't know how to explain this to you if this isn't already evident. The reason why there's a political left is precisely because left-wing ideas don't have the same institutional power as right-wing ones do. And left-wing people are not entrenched in positions of extraordinary power in the same way. Not just in government, but also in media. Fox News didn't have a true left-wing equivalent. Still doesn't really. Now we caught up a little bit. People stopped buying it at a certain point because the consequences of being careless started to bleed out into real life, especially during COVID when you had an extraordinarily incompetent administration addressing it. And then people started to think a little bit more, but not everyone did. Like, the consequences of this are far-reaching. That bike lock guy, nobody remembers his name. Nobody remembers his victim. Nobody remembers the context. People barely remember the name of the university it happened at. But they remember this. And that's etched in their brain forever. Optics aren't everything, but they're a big part of it. They're a really big part of it. And there is a difference between deferring entirely to optical concerns and to hand-wringing about looking your best to your political opponents who won't accept you anyways. And understanding that you live in a political situation that is entirely enveloped in mass forms of media that are controlled by not good guys. Like, do you want to know why someone like me was a Sargon watcher? It's because of that. And I had to educate myself out of that, and that took a lot of work. And let me tell you, most people don't do that work. And so, if you expect them to, if your retort to, hey, this is actually an okay idea, or we shouldn't challenge that as an okay idea because, if everybody was just as good as me, they would just spend the time and they would learn how wrong they are to be on the side of that guy who happened to get hit by the bike lock. You dream. No one's going to do that. Maybe 1 in a million people will do that. And if you only have 1 in a million people capable of understanding your point, you're in trouble. If Andy No lies about an event, I hold Andy No to account, not hand-wringing about the 3-second clip they're lying about. Well, you do both, right? So what you would do is you would criticize Andy No for misusing a clip, decontextualized to spread a falsehood. But then in addition, you would address people on side and you would say, like, unless there was a reason to risk this, when you do this badly, or when you do this at all, this particular thing, like smashing some random guy with a bike lock, you empower someone like Andy No in particular. And moreover, you are not getting anything back in exchange. So there's no trade-off here. There's only a disadvantage. If your complaint is that, well, it's unfair because Andy No's the bad guy and he's the one misconstruing the event. Tough. I don't know what to tell you. Were you red-pilled? No, thank God. I wasn't that far gone. Yeah, even if this wasn't an optical nightmare, this was ethically dubious at best and had little to no utility, yeah. Yeah. We spent more time condemning something from 6 years ago than condemning Sargon for deceptive editing. No, I'm also condemning Sargon for deceptive editing. But he also didn't need to deceptively edit that section. That literally just happened. He snuck up on a guy and hit him with a bike lock. Doesn't matter how bad the guy was. It really doesn't. That guy could have been convicted of murder. Wouldn't matter. It would have the exact same use. Like, I'm sorry. Let's see, did anybody accept my invitation to come on and talk? That's a shame. Well, moving on.
You know, as far as I'm concerned, that was a horrible, horrible day. Wait a minute, I'm not finished. I'm not finished, fake news. That was a horrible day. I will tell you something. I watched those very closely, much more closely than you people watched it. And you have, you had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent.
If I didn't know that there were so many left-wing...
Here's something you need to understand, okay? This is very important. The most important part about this video is not the argument Sargon is making. This is what you need to pay attention to. Right here. 425,884 views as of August 2017. That bike lock traveled farther than all of you combined can. That bike lock did the work of all of you working in tandem to spread the opposite message, like that. That person who swung that bike lock, he made careers. His primary accomplishment was to make people like Sargon exceedingly rich. For lying. And what he got in exchange was nothing. A criminal record, maybe. I can't remember what happened to him. Mod Plan Man, I've invited somebody else to chat as well, but they seem to have declined. I'd like to chat with you too. I wouldn't mind actually having a conversation about this. I think this is interesting.
Journalists with socialist sympathies. It would be baffling to me why Donald Trump would be forced to single out either one of these groups, but I do. But anyway, let's have a look at the footage that
The reason why is because one was an anti-Semitic white nationalist group that was chanting, "Jews will not replace us," and one was protesting them. And there were a few individuals in that crowd who did reckless things, but everybody in the opposite crowd is doing something that was extremely dangerous for entire groups of people. That would be why you condemn them. That's about it. The Nazis at Charlottesville represent an actual threat to the constitution of your state. The other people there do not. Not in their capacity as counter-protesters, at least. If it wasn't the guy with the bike lock, it would have been some other incident, and there exists no left to condemn violence. Well, no, because the bike lock stood out, right? It was the bike lock for a reason. The bike lock was a better one than the alternatives. Every other clip that we see is some vague image of some firework going off, or some people hitting a fence, or two people fighting each other, right? The bike lock guy is unique. That's a special one, because the person he attacked was docile and unaware. He snuck up on him and basically tried to assassinate, to all normal eyes, a random member of a crowd whose political affiliation isn't even obvious. He's just a guy in a shirt with a backpack. And incidentally, the guy who hits him with a bike lock is dressed like a bloody Marvel villain while he's doing so. If there's just a helpless level of center right-leaning media coverage of every bad thing that happens, why care about optics then? That's silly. First of all, there's not just a helpless level of center right-leaning media coverage. There is a helpless level of center. You mean a level that makes us helpless? Well, we're not. But because there is left-wing media, and left-wing media can counter these narratives. But things like the bike lock incident in particular, these supply a powerful visual tool only to one side. Not all acts of violence do that. The BLM riots, for example, like the riots around, where am I talking about here? Around Kenosha, like. The nature of those, because they're a response to institutional violence by the police, that's more ambiguous. So you have much more lethal forms of violence taking place in that crowd. Potentially. Like you have like the why can I not remember his bloody name? Rittenhouse. You have Rittenhouse being chased down by multiple people, but he's armed. His situation there is specifically known. He stands out as a particularly interesting element in that crowd. And even though it is in fact distinctly likely that the people chasing him would have indeed killed him, and in fact one person was apparently drawing a gun, because these are people in a situation that is already framed by a highly discoursed about situation of police violence against a particular group of people, and because he was there armed and very visibly and obviously not of that group of people, and because he was in basically a state of combat with them, this does not occupy the same place. It's a point of contention. The bike lock guy is not. If you take the side of the protesters who were chasing Rittenhouse, you're taking the side of people who may or may not have been responding to a very active threat and may or may not have been justified out of self-defense or the defense of other people in pursuing to disarm or even fight this person. That's not a statement one way or the other, but that's a position you can take. And the same goes in the opposite direction. There are people who argue, like Destiny does, that yeah, no, it's totally fine. He could have shot however many people he wanted as soon as he was pursued. Not even any mind to why he was there in the first place with a gun or what that signaled to the other people in the crowd. With the bike lock guy, it's literally just docile person on one side not engaging in violence. Other person sneaks up on them, hits them, flees. Like it's not comparable. So like you wouldn't tell people in the Kenosha riots to stay home and shun all like frictive political action or political violence even categorically necessarily. It's not to say that political violence would be wise, but it's a more complicated discussion. It's not just about optics. In the case of this, where there is nothing else to be gained, you look only to the result. And the result here is only supplying a powerful propaganda tool to your political opponents with no gain. Once again, you get nothing for it. Not you don't get enough for it. It's not like the compensation is insufficient. It's just not there. You literally get nothing for hitting that guy with the bike lock. Nothing at all. FTW, I still want to talk to you, so if you're available, at least answer me and let me know that you're not. Like if you're not available, that is.
Referring to, and Donald Trump is referring to there.
Most of the protests being peaceful led to no gain as well, so that's stupid, though. See, the outcome of a protest being peaceful that doesn't result in positive gains, well, there was a strategic error. Stuff was engaged with that was, like political activity was engaged in that ultimately ended up being futile. But that's all that happened. A random act of violence that was not part of protest strategy, that was just initiated by one person who was nonetheless wearing the colors of the movement, actually did accomplish something, just only for the other side. This is actually too stupid of an argument to engage in any further. Like, this is transparently obvious to anyone who's serious. I'm sorry. Bike lock guy is not justified. Grow up. See? This is ambiguous. This is not like bike lock guy. You have people with Confederate flags. You have people fighting on both sides. Both have sticks. Both are standing and facing each other. This is unambiguous. This is more ambiguous. The flags, they mark these people out as being part of a political movement that is considered by a large subset of people at the very least to be highly toxic and dangerous to democracy and to racial equality and to liberal values, etc., etc. The ones on the left just look like normal people. Bike lock guy. Let's look at bike lock guy for a second, just so we can highlight the difference here, because this is actually important. Where is it? I think it's right here. Yeah, it's right here. Back a little bit, we'll see him more clearly. Look at this person. This is him up here. Right here. What the average person sees when they see this is some normal person they know, like a parent or a son or a brother, getting hit randomly for lethal violence by someone who it is later discovered is a privileged, non-working class, or at the very least that's the impression given by them being an academic or academically employed. Well, that's about it, isn't it? I mean, there's no recovering from that situation. Nobody alive, except for people who will agree with you for no reason at all, will tell you that this is a good move. It's going to be unethical to the vast majority of people. It's strategically stupid to everyone with an ounce of sense. Yeah, exactly. Some guy assaulted with hammer by strangely dressed hooligan. That's what this looks like. Punching Richard Spencer was substantially less serious than this. Punching Richard Spencer was already understood to be a racist whose goals were to deprive whole categories of his fellow citizens. Him being punched in the open is going to be received much more differently than, again, this random guy in a pink shirt and a backpack getting slugged with a lock. Okay, yeah. The punching Spencer thing is, to my mind, far different because Spencer is an avowed fascist, and it's very easy to draw a distinct line of why the violence was done. Exactly. That's crucial. The general public already disliked Spencer. The mainstream media openly described him as a fascist and white supremacist. The general public thought it was funny when this goober with a frog pendant was punched in the face. Yeah, but they did not think it was funny when random college kid, doesn't matter what he actually was, this is how he's perceived, random college kid got slugged with a lock by no less someone in a teaching capacity. That's a bad look. That's a bad look with consequences. Have a good night, Bluestone. Anyways, we're dwelling on this for too long. I'm going to wrap it up here. We're going to continue from Weimar America onwards when we pick it up later. Not tomorrow, but later. How long have we been going for? Yeah, we've been going for almost 2.5 hours. So we'll wrap up here. This has been Vintage Sargon, Cassette 1. Shoe on Head is a lot more fun to cover. She's bad, but she's bad in a fun way. She has charm. She's obnoxious. She's obnoxious in a way that's fun to respond to. She has like good pacing and comedic timing. She's doing stuff that you can sort of challenge in like a serious way. I think the most interesting thing about Sargon here is just what an absolutely featureless puddle of mud what he has to say actually is. Like, it's almost impossible to respond to because it's so unstructured and rambly and non-specific. Like he'll in between everything say like just stupid and unjustified stuff. Like, that's not what a reason is, Anita. A reason is what do you say? A neutral scientific cause of an event. Like, I don't know. Sargon's just painfully boring, tedious, and nonsensical. I think what he provides is definitely not 9 years ago, but I think in his later stuff, what he provides is sort of a gentle and reassuring hum of someone with a strong sounding voice and a tone indicating conviction, condemning people who are associated aesthetically, who annoyed at some point in time people who are viewing his videos. I think that's really what his value amounts to. It's not about the content. He's basically just doing exactly what Destiny's doing. He's supplying an emotional need for a very unsophisticated audience to see people who make them feel bad about themselves get taken down a peg. And they're so desperate for it, it doesn't matter if it's earned. They just want that feel. They want the obnoxious college girls with the blue hair to get the Dr. House treatment. And when you grow up, as Carl apparently can never do, it's just deeply embarrassing. We'll call it here for now. Have a good night, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we will continue with this soon. I don't know if we'll do more Sargon immediately. I might want to do somebody else because this is absolute pain. I know somebody recommended Undoomed. I think he's still functional. More Shoe on Head might be good. She's been talked about a lot recently, and she's just more fun. I feel just kind of bad for Armored Skeptic these days. He just seems kind of pathetic. Who else is there? Vernaculus is one that everybody's forgotten. He never really took off in the same way. Academic Agent we've talked about. King Crocoduck actually recommended his own old video. We'll see. There are options. Take care, everyone. Have a good night.